So I'm cruising around on Fandom Knight when I come across a conversation, and that conversation got me thinking, and that's this video. So here's what's going on. I come across this conversation that basically says, so out of curiosity, me and my friend looked at the critical reception of the latest MCU film Black Widow, and the results are mostly mixed. However, I noticed more or less than positive. I noticed more or less than positive responses to Black Widow. So basically, he's saying, hey, out of curiosity, I checked it out. It seems like there's more positive things than negative things going on here in terms of their critical reviews, and that's getting me thinking that maybe I'm interested. Maybe I'm going to check this movie out. When a comment comes across that says, I'm just not interested. Taskmaster looks fugly, and the story is before Infinity War, which will probably add nothing to the overall story. I'll just wait until it's out on Disney+. So thoughts. So the first part is pretty standard. The main comment here that basically starts the entirety of the conversation is basically, hey, I checked out some stuff. It seems like it's going to be worth my time. I'll check it out. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong, especially when movies cost what they do. Right now, you're looking at if you and a buddy go to see it and you happen to be the one footing the bill and you're going to have popcorn and whatnot at the movie, you're looking at a pretty decent price tag. You're looking at like a new PlayStation game. You could get 2 or 3 PC games instead of going to the movie. You figure the average ticket right now is like $15 or $16 for a person. Plus, it's like if you want to get the combo that comes with 2 large drinks and a frickin' popcorn right there, that's like 17 something bucks. So like you're looking at big money. You're already well over $40 just for you, and if you buy your buddy a drink, and that's if he buys his own ticket. And if you're taking a girl or something like that, a girl or a guy, whatever, I don't care. Whoever you go on your date with is who you go on a date with. But if you take your significant other on a date, you got to figure that you're also paying for their ticket. You might not be, but if you are, that's another $20. That's like a $60 outing for 2 people to see one film. At that money, it's not necessarily a bad idea to check out some critics and see what they think. The real kicker, though, is to make sure that the authority that you're following is somebody that kind of has the same likes and dislikes as you, at least close enough that you could gauge that what they're reviewing, what they're telling you, is something that you would think along the same lines. And that can be hard to judge because even some people that would very blatantly say, well, you know, when Bill talks about something, we pretty much think about the same. I appreciate the way he thinks and breaks things down, and I trust his reviews. That's fine. Say I give a review about something, or I talk about something, or I say this is how I feel, or that's how I feel. If you are a fan of the Sentai Review and you watch me review hero costumes, you may change your mind pretty quick as to just how different our opinions literally can be from one show to another, one hero to another. I prefer certain things that you might not prefer, and sometimes there are weird things that we hold on to as personal opinions that kind of sway us and can sway us very harshly. This reminds me of this. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't care how great it is. It reminds me of this. It's not. See, that's stuff that happens, so it can be hard to guarantee that you're picking the right thing off of somebody else's opinion. So normally, I would say at this point, you got to go see it if you actually want to know whether or not it's worth your time. You can't put your faith in a critic, a score on something. There are plenty of movies that I like that bombed critically, but it is a lot of money, so it's nice to have an idea. Gauging multiple responses and saying it seems like there's more positive than negative, it's a good way to go. But it's the second part of the conversation that really got my mind spinning. I'm just not interested. Viable. we are entering a part of comic movies right now where you very much are going to start seeing burnout. They did something amazing with the MCU. They did something amazing, but they also played all the Top Guns in a row. And now trying to keep that going with a bunch of other guys is going to be tough. Even if you like the lineage, Captain America may pass the mantle of Captain America. But if Steve Rogers was the one you rooted for, if he's the character you liked, you may never get over that. He's gone. If Tony was the reason that you were massively invested in the MCU, he's gone. And one actor after another is getting old and kind of dropping out, or they've just put so much time into this that it's time for them to focus on something else, to try something else. Sorry, I was bugging me. So, this is where things get really complicated, they get really tough, is to gauge whether or not you still care. And we are reaching an area now where we could be watching the comic bubble pop. The superhero thing has really been running its course. And it's been going for a long time. I would say that comic book movies have been running fairly strong and then getting stronger, kind of moving towards the top of the hill. And now I think we're at the top of the hill, guys. I think we've reached the top of the mountain. I think all the way down at the bottom started with X-Men 1. I really think that's where the comic craze came in. And then all of a sudden it was followed by comic book after comic book after comic book. Whether they be successful or not, it was followed and built and followed and built and followed and built until we got to where we are now. And I really feel like after what Marvel proved, that you could do that universe and that it takes a lot of time and a lot of building and it's a lot of difficulty to get it going and get it going that well, we're at the top of the mountain. From this point, we either plateau or our interest, because they've already played all the cards we care about, go down. You can't keep it going forever. You can't. Now, I'm not saying the comic book movies would go away. I'm just saying that this is true, that sooner or later these bubbles pop. You can look back at movie history and see what was the big attention-grabbing thing of each decade going. And you can find something that makes a lot of sense. 80s was crazy with the slasher films. It pulled people into the theaters. I think 50s was the alien invasion. Remember, the silver screen had a lot of the monster movies that pulled people into cinemas. 80s, I would say, was slashers and gore fest things, really kicking into things like The Thing and whatnot and showing what those practical effects gore festing could do. And then I think in the 90s we really hit the action cinema. In the 70s we had the Kung Fu movie, which was different. That was Kung Fu movies. In the 90s we hit the action cinema. It was run, gun, bombs, explosions, big booms with Kung Fu mixed in, martial arts, things like that. We're really hitting the era of things like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, just different things like that really hit at that time. Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal, even if I don't care for him, I know that was a part of the era and whatnot. This was kind of the era that we were in. And as we entered 2000, I think we started seeing the first grazes of the comic book films. They weren't huge yet. They were the grazes. They were the beginning of what would become a major deal. Then, in the 2010s, the comic books blew up. Those were the movies to see. And that's where I think we really are right now, is that we're well over a decade of doing the comic book bubble, I think. I feel that. And so sooner or later, these things pop. They just do. We still have slasher movies, but it's never going to be, at least unless something crazy happens, it's just not going to be the 80s again. The next statement is that Taskmaster looks fugly. Personal opinion, you cannot sway. You watch the Sentai review, there are things I like, and sometimes I can't even explain why I like them. And then there's some things that I like, and then I slowly end up hating them for whatever reason, and it's hard to explain why. The way something looks is all opinion. It's all subjective. You can't argue with the statement of this guy looked like shit or this guy looked great. It's always an opinion. Art is subjective. The idea of translating Taskmaster to this universe is either going to work for people or not going to work for people, and most of the time it will not be unanimous. Moving past that, it's the story is before Infinite War. It will probably add nothing to the overall story. I will just wait. You know, he brings up exactly the problem that I'm having with a lot of things about, like, Star Wars wants to keep jumping prequels. It wants to keep going back and telling stories that it's already done. And I'm talking about the overall of the franchise, like the stuff that's going on right now with High Republic. Prequels are hard to tell because it's already been written in stone what will and or should happen. And if you cross anything, then you mess with the canon. And once you mess with the canon, you mess with the history. And once you mess with the history, here comes the fandom rants. And it also takes away the thrill. I know that Black Widow in this movie will be fine. She'll be fine. Maybe it'll explain something, maybe it'll have high stakes or whatever, but even if it has the highest stakes ever, the fact that this is taking place when it does means that they can't really shock me all that much. They really can't. They could show me a couple things that are fun and I could see an action movie, and even though I know the hero is going to win, that's part of why I went anyway and yada. But like, it does take away some of the thrill. And it can't necessarily add big, giant, important details to the mythology because we've already done the biggest, most important detail of the mythology. We fought Thanos. It's done. It's done. We've done this era as far as this era can possibly be played. The first era of the Marvel legacy of these sets of movies is played out. It's done. We can't do any more with it. We can't. We want to try, but we just can't do it. I'm telling you, it cannot be done. The more you add to backstory at this point in the era that we've already moved on from, the worse it's going to get. Scarlett Johansson should have got this movie a long time ago. That's the truth of it. And the fact that Marvel waited for somebody else to come along and prove that female action stars and female superheroes could do movies before they decided to say, you know what? It can be done. We're going to do it. Because you waited, you gave up your opportunity to do anything that truly matters. Like, sure, maybe you enjoyed Captain Marvel, but does that movie matter at all? No, it does not matter at all. And I'm going to make the argument that it doesn't matter because if you take it out of the MCU, we still would have gotten the same reveal at the end of Spider-Man that Skrulls were already here, and people still would have responded to it the same way. Oh shit, that's crazy. What does that mean? You see, that there is exactly what I'm talking about. The fact of the matter is that you can't show me anything in a prequel movie that really means much of anything. No matter what you add, if I take away the prequel movie, I still have the main movies, and the prequel movie, all in all, means nothing. If you delete the prequel movies from Star Wars and just watch the original 3 films, you still have the greatest movies, some of the greatest movies ever made. You do. They didn't add anything that necessarily enhanced it for me. I watch the prequels, then when I'm done, I watch the original movies, and I don't go, oh man, I know so much more about it now that this means so much more than it does to me now. You could almost argue that it makes it worse, Because not knowing the Vader reveal is a pretty big deal. That's just part one of the argument in general. That's not going into other parts of the argument that prequel movies overall don't add enough for anything to mean anything. The original series of Star Trek is wonderful. It is. The original movies are wonderful. Going back in time to do Enterprise, though I like that series, if you delete Enterprise, it means no nevermind. I already know that the lineage that matters begins at Kirk. Everything else is backstory, and maybe it adds to a couple of things in the original series, but maybe it does worse, and it damages the original series to the point where now when I watch it, I have to go, so is all that shit wrong? And it didn't happen? Or is all this shit, like, where am I standing now? What part matters? What part of the lineage am I supposed to believe and supposed to follow at this point, now that you've given me the original material that already set in stone everything that's going on, and then you come along with this stuff from before time and change it all? And now I got to worry about retcons and things like that. And then later on, I got to worry about things and patch the thing together with 3 timelines in the Star Trek universe that now make me go, okay, so I get it. So there's like Kelvin, and then there's the original lineage of Star Trek that took place. And then because Picard in First Contact causes that thing right after World War III, basically the Borg cause it, but that changes history, and it changes the man who would have originally set us on track, and because that man is irreparably changed, history is irreparably changed, and that's what leads to Enterprise and so on and so forth, and that's the headcanon that I have that makes me appreciate the storylines and not have to worry too much about it, but I shouldn't have to do that. Because you should just start at the beginning. I know you can't always do that. But, like, some of these series do not need us going back in time. And I'll tell you right now, the MCU is one of those series that so far has been moving us forward. Even when it told a story that was off, that happens before, it's still something like Guardians of the Galaxy or something like that that doesn't affect the main narrative being told, and so it doesn't really matter. We can deal with the fact that it happens here or there and whatever. Even if you drop the movie out of the lineage, it doesn't matter. That person shows up later, so on and so forth. Such as with Captain Marvel. Even if we remove her movie from the lineage, it doesn't change the fact that later on he'll push a button on a device that brings her to Earth, and when she gets here, I'll be like, oh shit, it's Captain Marvel! That's what they're doing right here! That's who he called! Okay, so that's fine. So even with or without that movie, it doesn't change the standards. It doesn't make a difference one way or the other. Prequel movies are not good for long stories. Long-standing stories are better off without prequels. It's just a proven fact. It always has been, and more than likely, it always will be. I don't want to see a Mobile Suit Gundam series that takes place before Gundam. It's fine if it takes place a little bit before Gundam, like Origin, and it builds up to the 1 Year War. That is not the same thing. That's still technically taking place at the same time as Gundam. The 1 Year War, when you go into something like the MS-8 team, that still works. That's still taking place during Gundam. It's not a prequel story. A prequel story, though, is going back before Mobile Suits, and it just won't be the same. Prequel movies don't really add any value to long-standing series, and it's about time that we realize that the best idea for long-standing series is to continue the story, not backtrack it. It's just the way I feel, and it makes me agree with the comment here that says, I'll just wait until it's on Disney Plus, because all in all, I don't care, and I really don't think it matters. But maybe you feel different. Comments in the section below. I'm going to get out of here.
I have spoken. Take what you will from it.